So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's the possibility that he could miss a few games
Yeah.
just like he did last year. So,
But time will tell. We'll just have to kind of wait and see how the season goes. I would consider him a starter at any given point. It's Matthew Stafford. Like the dude can produce any given week. So that's kind of just a gut call on your end, or kind of depending on who your quarterback is and when you drafted one. I could totally see him being a starter. Moving on, we got Kyler Murray.
Kyler, yeah, we're pretty close on this
Yep.
one. I mean, you had him at 15, I had him at 14. Uh, Kyler, obviously last year was kind of a wash for him, because I don't think he played that many games last year.
I think it was only 9.
So last year I think was kind of a wash. Yeah, he played 8 games and stuff. Um, but he's got Marvin Harrison, and Zay Jones went over to Arizona. He's got Michael Wilson. He's got McBride as his tight end, his running backs. He's got Connor
They
and
drafted
Benson.
Benson, I believe, right?
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are high on Benson as a rookie. Obviously, Harrison Jr. was the slotted the hottest wide receiver coming into the draft. So obviously, if Murray stays healthy this year, he's gonna have. I mean, he's gonna have a bounce back season. I I arguably has the best tight end in the league in McBride. I think you can make an argument that McBride is gonna, definitely gonna be the top tight end, if not in the top three this year. So he's gonna have a bounce back year, and again he's on my right on my short list of. I wouldn't fault somebody for starting him, um, because he definitely could be a starter in a 12-man league. He's right on the cusp of being a starter. So, and he's definitely gonna, if he stays healthy, produce more this year than he did last.
And he's also a running quarterback, so he could put up more points from a rushing touchdown perspective. Even looking at last year in the 8 games he played, he ran in 3 touchdowns. The year prior with the 11, it was 3 again. But he's had years where he's had 5+ touchdowns rushing and well over 500 yards. So
Yeah,
that kind of just adds to his value there on top of what he can do from a throwing standpoint. Like in his first 3 years, it was an average of 3,900 yards and 500 rushing yards. So like, there's a lot of value that can come out of Murray as long as he has a good year and produces. And Marvin Harrison, I think, is going to be nuts this year. But moving on, Jordan Love.
yeah. So Jordan Love, he's. Let me just say something. Being a longtime Vikings fan, there is no love for the Packers here. But the one thing I will give the Packers credit for is, man, they know how to draft
They
quarterbacks.
know how to be a pain in our.
So they had, before Love they had Aaron Rodgers and
Then
then
you have
Brett Favre.
Favre.
I mean, these guys have set themselves up at the quarterback position really well. Man, Love last year, he played 17 games. He threw for over 4,100 yards. He had 32 touchdowns. His receiving core is crazy. If Watson can stay healthy this year, he's going to be a comeback player of the year, I think. Um, Jaden Reed showed sparks last year. Wicks showed sparks last year. Dobbs showed sparks last year. Musgrave is an up and coming tight end. Oh, and did I mention they went out and they brought in Josh Jacobs for a running back?
And draft Marshawn Lloyd.
They drafted Marshawn Lloyd. They got AJ Dillon. Boy, their offense is, again.
Unknown.
Let me say, I am not a Packers fan, but they do have a loaded offense, and their receivers stepped up last year. Their young guys stepped up with Watson being out. They definitely have the ability to mix things up with with their uh, with their offensive weapons. So I expect that Jordan Love is going to have a similar season to what he had last year. I may have ranked him just a little bit low, um, and that's probably on purpose on my part because he's a Packer. So he probably could be ranked a little bit higher. I think he's going to have a similar year. I definitely see him as a starter in fantasy football. He's even though he fell at 14 here on our list. You know, I see Jordan Love as someone that could definitely be a starter and maybe surprise some people this year. You know, not to mention he also did have 4 rushing touchdowns and 247 yards. Was it 200? Yeah, 247 yards rushing last year. So again, he's mobile. He knows how to get out of the pocket, and he creates a lot of problems for the opposing team's defense. So I think he's probably gonna be one of the next quarterbacks to sign for a decent contract. I think.
Yeah, I think he'll have a pretty similar year, especially if Watson stays healthy. I don't know if he'll throw for as many touchdowns. That's kind of the only reason I ranked him lower on my list. I could see that drop off slightly to like 26 or 27. And I don't know if he'll run for another 4 touchdowns this year as well. So that's kind of why I ranked him a little bit lower. I think there's some upside to some other quarterbacks ahead of him in my decision making, at least that I see. So yeah, Jordan Love though, like you said, easily could be a starter. If you're going back and forth between like him and someone like Dak Prescott or someone else who I think is around the same level, same caliber, like he's definitely a starter in a lot of people's eyes. And I think anyone really at this point that we mentioned can be a starter at any given point. So to move on from Jordan Love, we are going to be going on into Dak Prescott. 2 fan favorites back to back for my dad.
Yeah. So listen, I get it. Dak had a great year last year. He threw for over 4,500 yards. He threw for 36 touchdowns. He had another 2 rushing touchdowns. Ran for 240 yards. Sorry, I'm just not a huge Dak fan. I never have been. Um, you know, uh, I just not a huge Cowboy fan. I actually probably like them less than I do the Packers, which coming from a Vikings fan is hard to hear. I think that they did absolutely nothing to improve their team over the offseason from the perspective of, um, you know, where it's anything that's going to show um, that he's going to have a better season. I think that they're still in negotiations with CeeDee Lamb. There's a very real possibility that CeeDee Lamb could sit out, if he doesn't get a contract. So I mean, you're hearing more and more that CD, might not even be at training camp. So I think his production is going to be dependent on the whole CD Lamb situation. You know, Brandon Cooks has proven that he can be a receiver in the league, but again, Brandon is getting up there in age. What I'm just really shocked at is their running back situation. I know Wiggs thinks that Zeke's gonna have a bounce back year. Zeke's getting up there in age. If you look at their running back depth, they lost Pollard. They thought he was going to be the guy last year, and he wasn't. I don't personally. I don't see Dak throwing for 4,500 yards again this year. Um, I think he's going to be right around the 4,000 yards, and and I think a lot of that depends on what goes on with CeeDee Lamb. But he's got who's he got at tight? He's got Ferguson at tight end, I believe, right?
Yep.
And so So I mean, they're gonna be productive. I think a lot of it's gonna depend on what their running game does, because if they can't get production out of their running game, and listen, let's be honest, last year I think that's the reason why he threw for as many yards as he did, is because their running game wasn't as productive as they were hoping, right? So, um, I'm not saying that Pollard didn't have a decent year. I'm just saying from a pure rushing standpoint, it wasn't as effective as they wanted. So I think his production is all going to depend on the running game and his production this year, of his offensive line. If they can protect them. So, but again, is he a starter in fantasy? Well, absolutely. I mean, I can't say he's not a starter. He'd never be a starter on one of my teams, but nor would I ever draft him. That's just me again. But um, I don't see him having the same type of year.
Yeah, and like I'm a huge numbers guy. Looking at the numbers, Dak has done this every other year. He'll throw for 4,000 yards and then he takes a hit. He'll throw for 4,000 yards and he takes a hit. Like I don't know. Looking at the patterns and the trend here, for me, I think he'll fall off slightly. And like you said, they really didn't make any improvements on their offense. And to me, like you need another receiver there or something. Your third receiver, I believe, is Tolbert. Yep. And your tight end is really just Ferguson. Outside of that, like yeah, you brought in Zeke, which again I think he'll have a bounce back year. I've said that in the mock drafts. Now I don't think it'll be what Zeke used to be at all by any means, but um, I think we'll just get a consistent Zeke performance there in Dallas. And aside from that, like I don't know, I just don't see Dak having another year with CD Lamb like he had last year, because I think CD went for like what was it, like 1,700 yards or something like that. Yeah, 1,700 yards on 135 receptions with 12 touchdowns. I don't see him having more than 1,500 this year if he even hits that mark, and having more than 8 touchdowns this year. So I think there's a fall off there, and I think that's kind of enough said there.
Yeah, if he even if he's even given a contract and he plays.
Yeah. But to move on from that, we're gonna move on to Tua, and don't ask me to say his last name because I will not work out.
Yeah, so Tua is interesting. We were really close on this one too. I had him at 11. Wiggs had him at 13. Um, uh, the big question mark around Tua is staying healthy, right? From a weapon perspective, I mean, seriously, you got Jaden Waddle, and Tyreek Hill. I mean,
On Achan, Mozart.
and you got Achan and Mozart, and then you got Jalen Wright that I believe they drafted.
Got Odell as your wide receiver.
And they brought in Odell this year. They've got Jonas Smith and
Durham Smith
as their tight ends. He's got all the weapons right there. I mean, he threw for 4,600 yards last year, 29 touchdowns, played 17 games last year, so it was an improvement from 2022, where he was having the issues with the concussions and stuff like that. If he can stay healthy, I think Tua definitely is someone that can produce. My big question mark with him is his health. I mean, 2022 he played 13 games. 2021 he played 13 games. 2020 he played 10 games. Last year was his first full season. So can he stay healthy is my question. If he can stay healthy, yes, he definitely, to me, can have another year like that. You've got, until someone knocks him off, I mean, and I'm a huge JJ fan, but you got Tyreek Hill, who came off of almost an 1,800-yard season last year. Do I think Tyreek's going to have 1,800 yards again this year? Probably not.
A yard off 18.
So, they just signed Waddle to a nice contract. I mean, so he's got all the weapons that you need. They brought in Odell and stuff. So if he stays healthy, I can definitely see him, having a great year. And spreading the ball out. And he could be around that 4,500 yards again and stuff. It just comes down to his health for me. Last year was his first healthy season, so if he stays healthy and he builds off of that, then yes, I see him as a formidable fantasy guy for years to come. But he's got to be consistently out on the field in order for that to happen.
Yeah, I agree, and he's got like a lot of weapons, like you touched on. Tyreek, Waddle, who 2 years ago both went for 1,300 plus themselves. You bring in Odell, that'll just bring a little relief there for those two, and like Waddle will have a bounce back year and have a good 1,400 yards on his own. So move on, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, so this one, another one that had kind of a gap between Wiggs and I. I got him ranked at 15. Wiggs has got him ranked at 8. Listen, if Aaron stays healthy, I think he's gonna have a really good year. I think he's got Garrett Wilson, obviously as one of his targets. Who's his other wide receivers there? I can't.
Mike Williams.
Mike Williams, they just brought in. There's huge rumors floating around that the Jets are going to trade for Davante Adams. If that happens, I think that's just going to blow up his value. But he's got Lazard. He's in the decline, but you got Tyler Conklin. You've got probably arguably second best running back in the league, and Bryce Hall. If Hall stays healthy, let me just say this, and I said this to Wiggs before, Rodgers makes his running backs better. And the reason that I say that is because Rodgers knows how to check down into run plays that makes his running backs have more success than they probably would have with any other quarterback. Love him or hate him, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. Yeah, he's 40 years old. I think he's out on a mission this year to prove that he can still do it. And I do think he has the weapons. Do they need some help at wide receiver? Probably. So I wouldn't surprise me if they make a trade. And let me just tell you, if they do trade for Davante Adams and he's got Wilson and Adams as his receivers,
that team's gonna be nuts. With Breece Hall too.
I mean, because listen, Davante can come in there. He's going to be working not only with Rodgers, who he worked with all the years at Green Bay. The offensive coordinator is the Nathan or whatever his last name is. He worked with Rodgers and Davante in Green Bay. They have got. If that happens, that's going to boost Rodgers' value for sure. I don't think it's going to happen. I'd be surprised, but you never know. I mean, Adams isn't happy in Las Vegas, and Rodgers has been trying to get the Jets to bring him there, so you never know.
I mean, and like you said, if they brought him over there, that would just be insane because you'd be seeing Garrett Wilson and Adams. Like, that's literally like a Tyreek and Waddle type duo, or like a Jefferson Addison. Like, on top of that though, you have Breece Hall, and then you have Tyler Conklin. Like, your team's gonna be looking nuts at that point. And then like you bring in Adams and your wide receiver 3 is Mike Williams. Like, that's just crazy to think about, unless they were to somehow for some reason trade Williams or something. I don't know. But
well, I know that Rob Williams is on the pub right now, so there's some question whether he's going to be able to start the season. But it's not uncommon for these guys to get put on the pub and come off during training camp. Yeah. Anyways, it'll be interesting to see. I definitely do see them bringing in somebody else, either via free agency. It wouldn't surprise me if they maybe targeted Hunter Renfrow, or they try to trade for somebody. If it's not Adams, maybe they try to bring in Treylon Burks from Tennessee. It wouldn't surprise me.
I could even see them bringing in Michael Thomas or something.
Micah Thomas. It wouldn't surprise me if they bring somebody in. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Top 10.